Yeah, good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. Um, Welcome to another live stream episode from myself, Oluwashitimi Ojo. Um, Today, I will be talking about scheduling APIs in JavaScript, right, with set timeout and interval, right, and we should also be able to look at decorators. Because they're very also important aspect of JavaScript as well. And hopefully, if time permits, we can look at forwarding, call, apply, and function binding. So that's another very interesting thing. I don't plan to use more than maybe 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 1 hour right onto this stream. Um, how are you doing? Um, Uluwani Femi. I can call you Femi though. Yeah. I hope you're doing well. So, the goal again is to just talk about JavaScript, right? As much as which one do you like? You prefer Uluwani Femi? Okay, Nifemi is what you like. Okay. All right. I hope you're writing code as usual, and I hope you're building stuff as usual, because those are like the most important thing a developer should be doing, right? Writing code, building softwares, and yeah. I guess I'm just quickly going to dive into it head on into today's um, topic, and then we can quickly we can quickly, if you have questions, do you have them prepared already so that I can answer them, or do you want me to get started first before I sort of like take your questions? Which one do you prefer? Huh. Okay, so majorly, set timeout is a big deal with JavaScript because most of the times, right, what we do best. Okay, before I get started, I should also say that I recently updated my blog, and um, I just released some new stuff on my blog, even though those articles have been old, right? I've been keeping them for so long, and there was a bug on my blog that I couldn't fix, which I have been able to fix now. So, if there's anybody who wants to know more about me, my story, my challenges, what has helped me to get to this point in this my journey, right? Then you should just check some of the things I did. Did some. I don't know why the home page is not doing as it should. So this is uluwashitemi.dev. Just some slight changes, fonts, and those are the things I changed. And I think on the writing sections, my 2021 review before I started like my recent job that I'm currently working on is out there as well. You can see for every heading that you see that I did not write anything there, it is because I was too lazy to put something there. So I hope the new ones I'm going to be writing, there won't be things like this there. So and if you find any typo, uh If you find any typo or any stuff, right, you can just edit this, right, and then you should be able to make a PR. But so that's basically I mean that's basically that. I released a couple of, I think there is this one as well. There is the 2020 review. I'm not even sure I wrote anything in the 2020 review, but 2020 was when I moved to Oshogbo, right? And obviously, yeah, I do podcast as usual. There was NSAS protest, there was Corona, and yeah, so you could just get a touch of all the things I really, really like to write about. I think 2019 is also here as well. 2019 is also not complete, right? I think, yeah, it's not complete as well. But I met Prosper Otemuyiwa 2019. So, I mean, this is 2019. Yeah, I think I started like my job early 2019. The job, my first official tech job, I started 2019. I bought my Mac 2019 as well. I think so. I think so. Or maybe late 2020. I can't even remember. So these are my coworkers. So I mean, but this is quite detailed about all the stuffs I am up about, and there is the 2018. The 2018 is the most complete one among all of them, amongst all of them. 2018, yes, fresh from NYSC and hustling. This picture was literally killing me. I can't imagine that this is my workspace. Oh my god. So I mean, it's just, and I started like all the effort into making Free Code Camp about the community work. It was really big. I tried my best to make sure everything worked and all of that. So it's just there for anybody who wants to read, and you can get to see where I'm coming from and where I am. I mean, you can gauge it and judge that I've been through a lot, right? If you can just work hard and stay true to writing code, right, the journey is absolutely bright. And yeah, so that is my early tech stories as well. I wrote about this guy. This guy is Colade. He's a big friend of mine. We write code together now as well. So you can just check it out. I think I wrote about Colade. Yes, I wrote about Colade here as well. Yeah. Colade is just one of the best guys that I've ever taught how to write code. If not the best among uh all the persons I've taught in particular. So it's a big deal. You can check it out, and I hope to keep building this blog as much as possible. I want to migrate it to Next.js. I think that's the next target for me, to migrate it into Next.js and to build it into something much more beautiful than this, right? So just do well to check it out. And you can also check some of the projects that I've worked on. I should update this with some of the new things I've personally worked on right now. So you would see all the struggles, all the projects that I sort of like worked on. What's wrong with this one? There's a problem with this here, and there's no problem with this here. Okay, so that is that. I just wanted to mention that as well. So you can catch me on YouTube, right? Where I do the live streaming. I would also be bringing a section of all my teachings here as well. So this will be regularly updated as much as possible. So let's get right into it. If you're joining for the very first time, I like to use javascript.info as the guide for all the things that I'm trying to teach. And I'm currently talking about advanced working with functions. I'm trying to talk about scheduling APIs, decorators, functions, and bindings. And yeah, those are things I'm trying to talk about as much as I can today and as fast as I can as well. So let's see. Proceeding to let's do hmm, think. So today, I'm gonna start with the scheduling APIs. Or should I start with scheduling APIs? Yes, let's start with the scheduling APIs. Now, when you hear the word scheduling APIs, what do you think we're talking about? Let me also go into, I have a folder for a file and folder for all the things I do on this live streaming. And I think is seeding to it's supposed to be JavaScript, and it's supposed to be live streaming. I can open with VS Code, right? So basically this is, yes, asynchronous API. So basically with scheduling APIs, JavaScript runs line by line, right? That's what most of us are pretty much used to, right? Where we just run JavaScript line by line. And the interesting thing there is that we now have the opportunity to, I think I like to install something, npm IG TypeScript. I think so. I should do this. So I want to install TypeScript as the latest. Maybe I should probably install the latest one at latest. And I can do npm ls global just to see. So I should have TypeScript somewhere here. Right, I have TypeScript here. Okay, maybe I can just install 5.6 myself. Let's just do 5.6 myself, 5.6.0 myself, and I can keep that. So in case your one doesn't exist, okay. Maybe it has not been released officially, but I mean we can still work with 5 point. Yeah. So most of the times, all the JavaScript we actually write, they run line by line. Most of all the JavaScript we run, they run line by line. So when I mean line by line means this line 23 runs here, then it encounters this function. Once it encounters, let me reload VS Code as well so that I can be on the same page. Um, Okay, so JavaScript runs synchronously, right? It runs line by line. That is, after it sees this function, it goes to the next line. It keeps going down from top to bottom. But we can have a situation that is very, very different and unique, where we can change the order of the execution, right, by employing some synchronous actions, right? It's possible for us to change, right, the behavior of the order by which JavaScript will run by what? By changing the entire order, because we can say console.log maybe first year, right? And we can say second, right? Second, right? And we can also say third. And everything is supposed to run in this order based on the first thing, the second thing, the third thing. But it's interesting that this is synchronous, But we can move to an asynchronous behavior by saying that, oh, maybe we should call it set timeout, right? And what the set timeout does is, okay, we want you to run maybe after, just to run, let's say after 0 seconds, basically, and you can say console.log, right? Let's see, this is supposed to run the fourth time. I know it might not be the fourth time, but it depends. So let's see what happens here with Node.js if we use Node.js to run this. So we use Quokka. I'm trying to use Quokka to run this code, right? Also, I can use some other tool to run the code, as it were. So if you understand what is going on now, based on the order of the execution now, right? Let's see again. Can we restart this? Let's do this again. If you see the way it executed, right? It is very, very, very interesting in the order of execution. Why is it not picking up anymore? Uh, why is Quokka not running anymore? Start on current. And I think that let's change this to 1. Now, what is going on here basically? This is not going to give me the best behavior that I expect, but I'm going to use Node.js in itself to run this. Then we can see the exact order by which this thing runs. So we are inside this place and I can run Node, or let's just say ES. Can I use ES? No. To run scheduling, right? So you can see that the first thing that logged was the first, the second, the third, and inside JavaScript came, the one inside of the set timeout came last. But in the order of the execution, it is actually the second thing. But what happens is that because it is a set timeout, JavaScript, using the execution context, using when it encounters this set timeout, it's sort of like, okay, it sort of takes it in and understand how many minutes do I have to run this, right? Set timeout is like, I'm going to run this for you after a particular time, a seconds, right? So instantly, that is stored that, okay, I'm going to run immediately. I get the chance. That's what the 0 is doing. That, okay, after I've done everything I'm scheduled to do, that is, I'm supposed to run console.log first, I'm supposed to run console.log 7, after the second and third. After I've done everything, then I will check what is left for me to do. Then eventually it come back to run the set timeout, and that is the timeout. So again, we can also do this in a very interesting way, that you can specify seconds here, right? Values, milliseconds, right? And you will notice, if you check the time, I think it usually tells me the time of execution. Is it execute? I think it has a way to tell me the time of execution. It usually tells us the time of execution. But if you look at the lower bottom here, right, you would see that everything ran in 1 minute, 1000, just in 1 second, 57, maybe approximately 1007.50 milliseconds. So it is because of this one here that made it run this 5. I increased this to 2, right? You would see that now there's a small time on the lower bottom of my screen, right? And that is showing what? That is showing 2000 milliseconds, right? So because of this behavior of this set timeout, it automatically sort of like increases when it runs this console.log. So that is set timeout. Set timeout is very interesting, and it gives us a way to run something not in the order of execution, but run something when we need something to happen, right? So you can tell it that, oh, maybe I'm going to make an API call. um I'm going to make an API call after a particular, let's say I'm going to make an API call after a particular operation, right? And we can see something that looks like this. Why is it even running this instantly? And we can see something that looks like this, then and this here. So basically, it should run the console.log here. So you can see that now it's running the fetch, right? And it is returning the console.log of the fetch, right? It's returning the array of all the things there. And everything is happening after the 2 seconds timeline that we specify. So, and the way it works is that it expects you to pass in a set of what? A set of functions. It expects us to pass in a set of function, right? That it expects to run. And that is the way set timeout works. So set timeout is what? It is you open a bracket and you put a function. So instead of using the arrow function here, I can decide to use a proper function, and I can say what? Run an anonymous function, right? And do a console.log here, right? And that is the way set timeout what works in this situation. And another very interesting one that is similar to this is the set interval. So what the set interval does is that, like, I am going to mimic, I am going to be running instantly, right? Like I'll be running at intervals. I'll be running at intervals. I'll be running at intervals. So if you specify me to run every 1 second, I'm going to run every 1 seconds. If you specify me to run every maybe 1 minute, I'm going to run every 1 minute. So that is what set interval does. So this console.log forth is going to be logged every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, we get what? That behavior, that benefit of doubt, that every 2 seconds, I am going to be logging what? Console.log forth. Every 2 seconds, I am going to log what? Console.log forth. Every 2 seconds, I will log the console.log what? Forth. And that is the behavior of what? That is one of the behaviors of what? Of set interval. So you can see that both of them, both set interval and both set timeout, definitely they run in, like, they change the order of execution of something, right? It alters the order of execution. That is, it's scheduled to run not normally as you would expect, but they run in an asynchronous behavior such that they can carry out specific instructions that are what? That are very important. And the foundation of set of scheduling API is the set timeout and the set interval. And I think if we're talking about Node.js, there is set immediate inside Node.js. Set immediate, which is the same thing as what? A set timeout with 0 value, right? That is set immediate inside Node.js. And there is also I think, yeah, there is another one in, I think, I can't remember what that is though. Is it process queue now? I can't remember, but there is process queue or something like that. Can't remember what that is again. Asynchronous APIs in JavaScript. In Node.js, asynchronous API in JavaScript. So there is another one. I can't remember. Sorry, I said in Node.js. That's what I'm looking for. In Node.js. There should be four ways to do that in Node.js, though. Probably, let's say scheduling APIs in Node.js. I know that there are two major ones in Node.js, if I'm correct. But I think once I remember, I'll talk about it. You can see that there is the set immediate, which is a timer in Node.js. There is the a timer in Node.js construct that what a timer in Node.js construct that calls a given function after a certain period of time. When a timer function is called, varies depending on what the method being used. So this is set immediate, right? I mean, the callback functions are queued for execution in the order they are what. So when you have multiple, now when we have multiple set timeout or set interval, right, it is queued, right? Basically, if an immediate timer is queued from the inside of an executing callback, then the timer will not be triggered until the next event loop iteration. So there is what we also refer to as what event loop, right, which is similar to the loop by which JavaScript runs stuff, right? That's what the event loop system does. So basically, if you want to know more about all of these, how the event loop works, I think there's a video on YouTube by Lydia Hale. Lydia Hale. Lydia Hale. Hale. Event loop, which is very, very explanatory about the way all of this works as well. Right? It is quite it's very, very valuable as well, right? For yeah. So if you want to check it out, you can also check the whole what's it called now? So basically, here she explained the whole process of how all of these runs, right? Basically, she talks about how they run and all of that. So you might want to check it out, right? And just to understand how JavaScript processes things, right? What the execution context means, then the things that run inside the micro task queue, right? And inside the micro task queue, that's where some asynchronous things are processed, right? Before they are sent into the task queue for like to be ready for what's it called now for processing. But in general, the major thing there is that set timeout helps us to run code when we choose to run it by setting a timeout value, while set interval helps us to run something at an interval. So if you want to run something 2 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, right? Which is which is sometimes very powerful as well because they are depending on the code that you're trying to write, right? You would run into situations where you have to write something that looks like this. So if you want to watch the video, I just dropped the link to the video as well, right? On the comment there. if you really want to take this a little bit further to learn more about the way JavaScript runs. So there is the other part of them, which is the clear intervals, right? So as they have set timeout, there is the clear timeout, right? So it means that we can always save the result. We can always save the result of an operation. We can always save the result of an operation, right? So for example, this is what I'm saying now. This that is running here, I can set it to what? A particular ID. And this ID, we can also console.log this ID at every point in time. So this ID is supposed to be a value that we can also what? We can view and console.log every point in time. Right. We should just make this a timeout to make it easy on the computer to process. So when you see the console.log of the ID, right, you see a lot of things inside the information there. But the major thing that is important is that it gives it a value, an ID value, right, that you can now use to that you can use to set pass something to what? A clear timeout. So it is the ID that we send to clear timeout to be able to clear the timeout, right? And there are ways to also abort it. You can abort, right, the scheduling APIs. Let's say there's a need for us to abort them. Abort means that maybe before they eventually run, you want to check a condition, right? You can abort that process, right, with abort controller, or you can also use I can't remember the other one now, to abort all these scheduling APIs. So if we can use something to create them, we can also abort them anytime we need to. That is, you can destroy them, right, anytime we need to. So if you check these again here, I think, see here. So you can see what is being logged here now. And if you look at inside of that value, it is telling us that what destroyed is true. So it means that it has seen that we have cleared the timeout, right? So that is a way for us to know that, oh, we have stopped the timeout using the clear timeout, or whether we want to clear the interval. So with what? Because instantly they are always running. For example, the case of the clear interval, the set interval, it will always be constantly running. And let's say there's a need for you to clear it out of your computer's memory, then you need the help of what? Or else it is going to lead to a memory leak, right, in your application, right? Yeah. So just for teaching purpose again today, both of them, they work in a way where once you write them out, right, they take a function, right? It's like a function, but inside of them you put either an arrow function, right? You put either an arrow function, and that is what stays inside. So it's the body of the function that will get called, right? It's the body of the function that gets what called, right there. So that is that with what? The set interval and the set timeout. Now we can put them inside each other, right? And for example, let's do an example of one that we can put inside each other, right? And I'm going to write this. I'm going to stop using Quokka to run this, because I want to put two things inside each other to run. So the first thing is that we can create a function called tick. That is, something should be ticking like a clock, right? Tick, right? Ticking, and then that's the function that we're trying to create, a function tick. So we can say function tick, and instantly the function is going to just console.log what? Tick, right? And inside of the body of the function, we want to do some time, let's say some we want to call another one. Let's just do this like this. Another hmm, let's see. Maybe we should just run it this way. So inside of this place, let's say let new id equals to what? Another set timeout, right? Timeout. Let's set it to another timeout. And we can pass it, maybe we can pass it, we can pass it tick and pass it to here. So what we are doing is you're running the initial first. This one is a function, right, that we want to pass to another set timeout here, set time out. And we also want to pass it a tick function that we can call like this. And so we can do well to run this now. And let's see what happens here. So the first timeout we run, it will console.log tick, right? And the second, when it gets to this line again, there's another timeout that is also scheduled to run, which is also going to console.log another tick after 1 second. Both of them are supposed to run after 1 second, right? So you can see that we've run into a serious problem, right? We've run into a serious problem. Anytime this first one runs, right? Anytime the first one runs, it will run the next one. Anytime the first one runs, it runs the next one. Anytime the first one runs, it runs the next one, right? Because this is the first one that will run. It will run after every 1 second. So when this is done, it will what? Encounter another one inside of this place, right? And that is what the problem. So when you are putting timeout inside of each other, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that you're careful, you understand what is going on before you just nest the timeout, or whether it's an interval, right there. And we can also use this new id to clear things up, right? So we can use this new id to stop the whole process, right, if we so desire to stop any of the process. And I think that another thing that is very important is we can even receive this particular one. We can receive this id here, right? We can receive this id here. And yeah, this is the id that we can clear. This is another id that we can clear in case there is a need for us to stop any of the timeout, right? So that is that. But the idea that we're saying here is, you can see that what the ticking keeps happening, right? It is running as if we are running a set interval. That's what is happening. It is running as if we are running a set interval, right? It keeps console.logging what? The tick, running both of the ticks at what? Every 1 second interval. So, and this is quite I mean, using this is quite more better compared to using the set interval, right, as the case may be as well. So that's another thing that you can. And you can also make it you can also make it just one id, that is, let them use the same id, right? And you just declare one id at the top, right? And you can set them to use one id, such that it will allow you to be able to clear things up, right, easily, right, if you want to clear things up. So yeah, you should be able to, I think we should be able to run this now. This should be able to run. So that is majorly that, right, about the timeout, the scheduling API. I can quickly jump into the um the decorators, the forwarding, call forwarding. Which other one again do we have? We also have the, what's it called now? We have the call and apply. Call, apply, and binding is another very interesting behavior within JavaScript as well, right? That so it keeps logging, and then at some point we can clear just what we can clear just what the timeout, and you can clear the timeout easily. Should be able to clear the timeout and everything should stop executing. I'm sure that it has stopped executing now, right, in the memory. So it works, right, if you use the clear, because it clears this one and this one, because both of them are joined together by just one ID, as the case may be. So that is that with that. Let's just see, what does decorators, like when you hear the word decorators are not quite common anymore, right? But they are also they're just a way to decorate things. When I say decorate means you alter the behavior by decorating it, right? So that is majorly what decorators give. That is, they are a flexibility or functionality that we had to functions that can enable us to what to add some extra behaviors, right? That's what decorating means. So we're just going to see some examples of the decorators, and majorly I know that decorators in classes, they are much more well advanced, right, compared to the ones that we have inside of maybe that we can use with functions, because if we're going to use decorators with functions, it's not as advanced as the ones that we have inside of what the inside of just the ordinary functions that we have. And I'm not sure it is a standard part of JavaScript yet, right? So decorators in functions are just wrappers that we wrap around the functions, right? For example, when we are at React level as well, you can wrap some things around React, right? Maybe you can wrap a component with a higher order function, right? A HOC or whatnot, and this other advanced things there. So that is the major idea of decorators, but it is pretty much an advanced part of JavaScript, and it's not so popular or common, right? But we'll just run some examples, and we look at what how scheduling we'll look at how decorators can help us as JavaScript engineers to be what powerful. Another thing I want to say here is that if you want to learn more about, there's the promisified version of set timeout, set immediate inside of Node.js, right? Because if we want to use a promisified version of this within JavaScript, we'll probably have to do a function called maybe we have to do a function called delay, right? We have to do a function called delay, and you want to say that what this is going to be a function that is going to what return a new promise, or let's just say, yeah, we can say it's going to return a new promise, and that new promise is going to give us what two things, right? That is, we can give us another function which is what a resolve, right? A resolve and what reject, right? And we can take the resolve and reject as another parameter for functions. And we can say this is what a function, and we can call this here. And we can then say that we want you to set timeout after a particular time. And so when will the set timeout happen? The set timeout is going to happen maybe after a particular time variable specified, and we can put the time variable inside the delay, right? And we can carry out a particular function. We can put a function here as well. Maybe we'll just say if fn, right? We can put the fn here, and we can call the fn here, and we can just say fn and call the fn function here. I think this should work if I'm correct. So let's assume that we have a function that what a function that had two number, right? It had what number one and number two, and it's just going to return the addition of two numbers. So what we can do with the delay is that we can delay it, right, by what a time delayed by 2 seconds, right, and call the addition by this. And this is what this is going to return a promised version of this. Is that correct? No, it's not correct yet. I think it's not correct because I'm not even using the I'm not using the res. So I can say that this is supposed to be a arrow function, and I can now do a resolve, right, into bracket what fn. Is it a resolve of the called function or fn? I'm not sure which is supposed to be though, but let's hmm. Ah, I think it returns the same height. It doesn't return the same ID, but sorry, the ID is overriding each other. So which is always keeping the latest value of the ID, right? I think. Colade, yes. So the ID will be overriding to always give us the last set ID per time. So that way, once it override each other, then you can clear the latest one, which can stop the execution of that particular set timeout. I think that's the way it's supposed to work, though, because they will definitely be pointing to different timers, different IDs. I am sure about that. That they'll be pointing to different IDs. But because we are using the same variable to store them, then they will be overriding each other. Uh, why is it saying fn is not a function? Why is it saying fn is not a function? Let's see. Do I have to call the fn? I don't even know what I'm supposed to call it or not. But then it has to be fn dot call. How do I pass a parameter to this? Let me do something first without passing this parameter. I think I can use some ways to pass. I want to be sure that this is supposed to work. This delayed version here is supposed to just return back. Yeah. I know fn is passed as a parameter. There can be situation where we pass fn as a parameter though, but is it going to run into a are we going to run into a loop, a problem? What am I doing though? Let's see. I'm trying something first here. I think I'm running into an infinite loop. Yeah. It's not giving me what I expect it to do. Let's run this on the node side of things here. Okay, if I want to take another parameter there, let's do yes, no, I'm coming. Let's see. That's the only way we can pass parameter to this. Yeah, thank you. So it's going to be a function, maybe, and then we can pass whatever value that we have here, right? We can pass it down here, and that's going to be so you're seeing something like this, right? So if we get some values here, we can pass it inside this place as well. Is that what you're saying? Well, I think it's no longer running as a timeless loop anymore. So now this operation is going to return a function. No, it's still running an endless loop. Is it set timeout? Let's do this here. A tenable should be here. Then we can do the then here can take so here if we get a function, if we get the fn here, then the function is supposed to be the return function as at this place, and then we can then call this here, and that should call this second line. And we can console.log this to be sure that we are doing the right thing. I want to be sure that we're doing the right thing. But I know that the green line is getting there, so it is calling that second line. And if I run it in the terminal, we should get our tree logged. We should get our tree logged. For some reason, it's still not logging the tree. Yeah, we should get our tree logged. Probably because I've not saved it. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, that's another very good one. So now we can call this here so that we just pass the result of the operation instead of calling it here, right? So fn is going to be what value. This is just going to be saving like the result of our operation, and we can send it out back, I think. Yeah, I think it does works, right? So if we want to pass a value to this now, then I can pass some things here. Now I can say num1, num2, and we can pass those two values down to this place because every function in JavaScript is a closure. And then we can replace this with num1, num1, and num2, I think. So here we can then pass some things here, and we can say 10, 20, and that is supposed to give us something. Let's just save this here. I don't know why it's taking time. Oh, yeah. It will be available to host here. Thank you. Uh, we're still seeing. Okay. Yeah, I think it works now. For some reason, Coca is definitely extremely slow. Right on my computer there. So this is a promised based version of a promise based version of this. of that we just created, even though it's not like very clean and all like that, but this is a promise based one, right? And we can also await this, right? If we are within an async function, we can always await that as well. So within Node.js, if you check the documentation, right, we can import set immediate from node timer / promises, right? Uh yeah, I don't know. It just started being slow now, right? The slowness is too this slowness is too much. I can't deal with it. It's too slow. So you can always use the promise version if you are within the Node.js environment. And another thing is you can see that they are using a bot controller to cancel things out, right? If they need to catch anything, so they are passing. So you can pass an extra. So just where you pass your time, we can pass the signal such that if there is a need to abort, then it can decide to abort. We've talked about the clear. Claudia, do you know another way to schedule that is different from set timeout? That is different from set timeout, set interval, right? There's one inside JavaScript. I can't remember what it is now. Uh, Most especially inside. I know it's inside the browser as well. Is something I can't remember what the name of that thing is though, and it's seriously funny that I'm forgetting this. Hmm. There's a particular thing. I don't know whether it is process.q or process dot or something dot something. What's the name of the scheduling library that you're using? That's interesting. But if I do some research about it, but there is another inbuilt scheduling system inside of our JavaScript, right, that helps us to also schedule. And instead of us also scheduling stuff, there is worker as well. We call them web workers. You can use web workers to also run another thing, to run another operation entirely, right? Anytime we are within we're within our JavaScript system. Most especially, you can run your workers whether you are in a browser setup or whether you're in a Node.js setup. So the worker is going to create another thread entirely and run. Now, the thing with this scheduling API is they are still running on the same single thread. That is why the event loop must know how to arrange them, right? Because they are still on the same word, on the same thread, right? They are still working on the same thread. It's just that the event loop is smart enough to know when to pause and when not to pause. Which one should I run? Which one should I not run? And that's the work of the event loop. It knows how to schedule, how to say, okay, this is the first thing, this is the function we should run. It knows the parameters per time and is able to quickly execute the right things per time. But with a worker or a web worker, or whether it is an ordinary worker that we're running in whatever context we're running it, it runs on a separate thread, like it runs on a thread that is different from your main thread, because JavaScript is a single threaded language. So it means that by the time JavaScript is processing every stuff, your system can hang or your browser can hang, and it can be too cumbersome, most especially with animations and all these other systems here. So I think there are a lot of other things as well. Look at this is the scheduler. I don't know about the scheduler before, but scheduler is also inside Node.js that you can use. And I think the scheduler also has a dot yield. It has a dot yield that you can also use to yield something. So I mean there are, but I think they are still experimental. So I don't know why they've not moved to the latest one here. uh so basically I think that's it with them. I'm not sure that I can't remember why I'm forgetting this though. Oh my god, it's under the process, and I feel like Let me ask ChatGPT though. If ChatGPT is going to help me. Uh, Scheduling API. There is a process dot something. Yes, I know that there is request animation frame in a browser. Then we can use workers. Uh, okay. Uh, everybody's missing this particular library that I'm looking for. Process dot tick. Yes, it's process.tick that my brain is looking for. My brain is looking for process.tick. So process.tick is another very interesting one that it just works like you're calling a set timeout to be equals to 0, where you're setting the time to be 0, but it does almost the same thing that you have there. So this is another very nice one. I know that I should be able to just remember that there's another one that could work if we run into any problem, right? So here we have hello one, then with set immediate, it tries to run. If there is nothing else to run, set timeout, okay, and then the process.tick runs in between. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Process.tick. It's not very common. It's not very common anymore, but I know it works. I know it works. It works. That's nice. I know that with Node cron, like you said, is able to help you to schedule things, right, to happen based on what you declared. So you see the first hello, right? Then the process.tick runs faster than the set immediate. The process of tick runs faster than the set immediate, and then we have the last timeout there. And I think that we're also able to put one more, right? We can do a set timeout with 0 as well, which is the same thing as the process.tick. So this process.tick is just like, I am the next thing you should run. That's what it's saying. I am the next thing you should run. Simple. I am the next thing you should run, right? So it doesn't bother to go to the scheduling APIs, right? It forces the next thing. Like it's like you're telling the JavaScript thread to like do the next thing. Like this is the next set of things you should do, right? And that is with process.tick. I'm glad I remembered. And ChatGPT helped me to remember. Okay, I sort of remembered one way or the other. So I've talked about web workers. Web workers are actually very interesting as well, and request animation frame, right? If you're inside the browser, anytime you're animating something, please use request animation frame. Please, that will save you some performance a lot. So even if you're using set timeout to do the animation or whatnot, but just wrap it inside the request animation frame. So the request animation frame helps us to make sure that the process is smooth and it runs in a way that doesn't impact the performance of your system as much as possible. So let's just do some little playing around with um, with decorators, and I'm just going to be bringing some functions around here, and this is just based off what we have on javascript.info majorly, right? So we can have a function that probably runs a very heavy operation, right? We can have a function that runs a very, so let's assume that we have a function called what? A function called slow, right? And yeah, let's say it takes X and it runs a very heavy operation. So, or when I say very heavy operation, is CPU, like CPU intensive operation. And we could just assume that let's just call this let's just call it like this, and we can pass x here, and we can also return x here. Now we can decorate this operation, right, by creating a function that can help us to memorize that thing, right? And that is, let me see what Copilot is giving me, whether it is similar to what I want. Yeah, I mean, it also work, right? The one Copilot is giving me also works as well, right? It works. So majorly, what is happening here is that uh what is happening here is that let's just see it this way, where um we are going to call this function now. We are going to wrap this like no, we're going to just wrap. We're going to say memorize, right? And then you can pass it slow, and you can pass it you can pass it you can just put slow inside, I think, and you can pass something to it as well. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So here, in between this place now, we can decide to do some interesting things there. Is instead of using objects for the caching, yeah, like Copilot is suggesting, we can use a map, right? Because maps are quite better compared to objects in terms of managing performance. So we can call that a cache, right? And we can say it is a new map. And when we have done that, we then can return a function that checks whether the cache is available, right? We can return a function. And what that function does is that the function is expecting us to pass some parameters in, and it can carry out a particular action, right? So the first thing is that if there is that function inside of the cache, right? That is if cache dot what? If cache dot as x inside, that is if there is x, right, inside of the cache, right, then you want to use the one that we are using inside of the map. Then you want to use the map to do a do a cache dot get, right? Do a found, let found equals to what? Let found equals to cache dot get, and then we want to return found, right, this way. So it means that anytime, right, this heavy operation is trying to run, so anytime we're trying to run this heavy operation, anytime we're trying to run this heavy operation, right, it will check the cache. That's what this line is saying, that check the cache, right, and use the cached version. Now, if there is no cached version, what should we do for the very first time that thing is going to run? Oh, please carry out the operation and help us to save what the result inside the cache. That is, you can do a cache.set, right, inside of what that operation, and then we can return what the result of what the operation, right? We can return result. Now you can see that now automatically it is running for the very first set, right? But if we call it the second time, right? If we call it the second time, it's supposed to find it inside the cache though. Oh, why is it not getting it inside of the cache? If cache dot has one, cache dot set I'm missing something here. Can you see my screen? I think there's a problem with sharing this sharing screen, the browser sharing screen API. I think I've noticed this inside of Google Meet as well. I think, is it that they updated it that anytime you lose focus of anytime you take focus away from the application that initiates the sharing, then it stops streaming. Hmm, that's interesting. So what I was trying to do earlier is I was checking another code base to be sure that I was doing the right thing. So I created this slow function here, Uh, and it's just supposed to maybe carry out a particular operation and return the result of the operation. And we want to have this function called memorize, right? And you pass it that same function, right? Such that we have this map, right? We have this map that will sort of like be the database that we're going to be using every time. I think the major thing is I don't have to recreate, it's recreating this map every new time. So here, return this function, right? That is, anytime this memorize is going to call, it is going to accept a function, which is a heavy operation, and it's going to try to check whether that particular result is existing in the what, in the cache, using what, using using the map API, which is what, which is us. So it's checking whether our map has this particular value, right? If it has this value, then it will use the cached version, and if it does not have, then it will always create this function new every time. So what we can do, I'm not sure whether this works though, but let's see. So we can call the memorized version of this, right? That is memorized version of slow. Memorized version of slow should be this, and then we can say memorized one. And if we call memorized the second time, it finds it in a cache. If we find second time, it finds it in a cache, right? And that is the what, that is the behavior, right, of what I'm trying to do. That it doesn't have to run this every function every time. It doesn't have to run this every function every time. Now what is happening is that we are relying on JavaScript to always check this map every time, right? That is, does the map has the particular value? So you can see for the very first time, which is this one, it doesn't have. For the second time, doesn't have, and the third time it can now find it in the cache, right? Because we are using the same. The reason why this one is different from this one, right, is because JavaScript execution context of both functions are different. So that is why both of them are different. And anytime if we run this again, it will try to recreate a fresh what function, right? Like that. But this is an example of decorating. So this particular memoized version is a decorated function. And I think for anybody who has written Angular before, Angular uses a lot of decoration, right? Where you can do, maybe you can create component, you can create a function called component, and you can decorate that function, right? You can decorate the function by passing, I think you can decorate it with some different behavior, and they can specify, maybe you run the memoized something here, right? They can do something like this on that function, right? I don't write Angular though, but I know that there is a syntax like this. I'm not sure whether classes also allow us to do something like this before and currently now, but I know before classes used to allow us to do this kind of decorated behavior, but I'm not sure it is inside the current JavaScript structure that we have anymore. So this is just a decoration, right? That is, running the memoized version is what running a decorated version, right? So it means that instead of it running afresh, it will always check the cache, use the cached version for the operation. So that way you're saving your computer a lot of what? A lot of stress, right? With the help of what? With the help of JavaScript to help us to run a very performant, improved slow function, and that's memorize. That is decoration. Again, what decoration is that you wrap a particular function with another higher order function. So this memoized is a higher order function, and it is accepting slow as a what parameter, and then it is changing the mode of operation of slow to make sure that it is performant, right? To make sure it is performant And that is what we have with what decorations. Does that make sense? Do we understand? Can we relate with what I just said now? Is that clear? So this is just using the map syntax. This cache.as is checking whether something is inside of the cache. And so we can also use object, right? If we were to be using object, you can also use object, or you can use another data structure entirely, right, to keep track of what is going on right there. So that is what the decoration, right? Again, it's a way to just wrap a function that is heavy, that does a very maybe interesting thing, with a another function that can help us to improve the way the other function behave. So that is decorating. So it is the whole idea of the decorating is the wrapping it, right, such that further calls will not be expensive anymore, such that further calls will not be expensive anymore, right? That is what we have with what decorations. uh Again, it's only if you're building maybe packages, or you're trying to do some higher level stuff. I think at some point in React you can do something like this as well if you're writing React. So that can also happen if you're also doing React at some point. But Nifemi, does that make sense to you, or it is high level? Does that make sense to you, or it is high level? Or can you relate? It's high level. But you kind of like get the concept. I think the major thing is, do you get the concept? Do you get the concept? Do you get the concept? All right. And that is, I think once you get the concept, every other thing will sort of like fall in place later on. Um, so that is that about that. And I think another thing that we can also do is, I just saw another thing here that we can do, is that instead of even running that slow function anymore, we can do something like this and say, maybe instead of passing something here, we can call this new slow function, like new slow, right? So new slow is now a function, right? And subsequently we can just call the new slow right here, right? And it will just be one call will be the fresh one, and the two other will come from the cache, right? The two other will come from the cache. And that with the that um it's a very very cool trick as well, very cool trick that we can use within JavaScript to make things very impressive. So I quickly talk about the call, apply, right, and function binding. The call, apply, and function binding. So if we have a function there, the first one is, let's talk about the function dot what. There's a function dot call, which is what function dot what call. So what does function dot call means, right? Function dot call just allow us to be able to so if we have a function, most importantly, if that function needs a particular object to run, right? So let's say a function needs a particular object to run. For example, let's do like this here. We can say const. Yes, decorations are very they're inside JavaScript as well, but it's not like what you probably run to every now and then when you write code. It's just one off. It's a one-off thing that you probably maybe run into if you're trying to maybe do some, if you just want your code to do some advanced operation. You can that's when you probably need what decorators. So if we have a greet function here, we have a greet function here, we can say this, and to call this greet function we will do obj, right, dot what, obj dot greet, and it's going to call our what, our hello journ, right? But what if we create another object out of this, or we want to or what if we don't want to call, we don't want the context, because right now whenever we call this operation, is there a syntax error? Or I know there's a syntax error in what I'm doing. So there's a syntax error in what I'm doing. Yeah. So here, this calls this hello journ. And the context of this, why this dot name is changing to journ, is because whenever this function greet runs, our this is pointing towards this main object. Our this is pointing towards the main object. So let's assume that we need to call with another object entirely, right? Instead of us calling this greet with another, we need to pass this greet to somebody else, not just John. So if we want to pass it to another person, we can then say that, oh, the name of this person is Jane, right? And if we say this is Jane, so you can see that if we pass it like this, it doesn't understand, because greet does not accept anything, right? So that is the situation where dot call will be very useful. And you can now say what, there is a function dot call. Before we call the function, we can say dot call. And when we want to do the dot call, you're now going to pass another object, which will now become the main context, right? So we can now say, oh, name here is now what? Name here is now what? Nifemi, right? The name here is now what? Nifemi. Why is the name Nifemi here? Because I want, anytime they call this greet function, I don't want it to check this, the name value inside this context. I need it to use this one as the main context of our execution. So you would now notice that what we are now getting hello Nifemi, right? Based on what we are doing. Now, what is the dot call helping us to do? The dot call is saying that instead of this function to be calling itself with this obj context, it's not going to do that. It's going to change that context and use what? Nifemi as the context. That object inside of what they call, especially the first one, that is what is going to use as what? The context. So another example could be what? Let's have what? A sum. Like let's have a sum, or let's say value is an object, right? And inside of value we have sum, right? And sum is supposed to be a function that's supposed to add two things together. So it means that if we try to call what? If we try to call value right here, and we say value dot what? Value dot sum now, it's going to break the code, right? Because now it's going to run into a problem, because this is not returning a value, right? It's returning undefined, and it's returning undefined, and it's breaking the whole application, right? Because we're trying to add two undefined together. So what can we do? We don't call the function immediately. We call a dot call on it, and we specify our context. right? We specify our context. Again, we could do a dot call and specify your context. When I mean specify your context, what I'm saying is that what you declare another object here that will contain the variables that you're expecting. And if you have a need for more than one variable, you can pass extra variables here, right? And if I check here, I think if I call here and I say extra, I think if I say extra here, extra, that should be the extra should be pointing towards let's say this first. Hmm, can it take extra? Let's check what is inside extra. What is inside extra? Extra should be the extra variables that I'm sending alongside. So you can see that the extra is what? The array of what? 10 and what? 20. If I don't destructure this, I think it will point to 10. Yeah, I think I need to destructure. I need to do a rest parameter on it and extract everything into an array called extra, and I can use that extra there. So this is the call. You pass this argument, and you pass, if you have more than one argument that you're expecting, you can pass as many things here. So it means that inside of the sum function, we can expect certain things there and we can use it. And it is a single value. So it is this value, this value. So if you want to use them together, you can spread them or extract them into an array, right, before you're able to use them. So that is what the dot call does. The call helps us to call some certain functions outside of like the main context that they were created, right? So, and it is also similar to apply. It is similar to apply because apply does exactly the same thing as well, right? Apply does exactly the same thing as our what dot call, I think so. Yeah. And if we call this as well, it's supposed to console.log a particular thing out for us. Yeah, go on with your question. You can go on. Is it only in object we can use a dot call? Again, it is not. You can see that we're not using it in the object, but we need to use it in a place where there is a this context. You must be able to know what your this is, right? Because anytime you're using a dot call, it has to do with a this context. So it means that you must be aware that for your dot call, for your apply, they are first used with functions. That is the major thing. But for us to understand the value of this, right, it has to be called within the context of an object, because it is only when we are within the context of an object that we can know the value of our this, right? So that is why I was saying that you would need to understand. Uh, I don't know if that answered your question. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Hmm. So whenever we are using a dot call, you're doing the dot call on a function that should be able to know the context, its environment, that is the object that is calling it, right? So that is why you would notice that there is always like an object, maybe a value dot sum, which is the main function, and then on that main function we can call the apply. So we can use it where we have this context. Yes, you can use it where you have the this context, and the this context will only come whenever we are declaring a constructor function, or whenever there is a constructor function, a class, or when there is a group of object or a object declaration. That is when there is this. And don't forget as well, there is also this in our browser context, right? But this is just pointing towards your window, right? Because in this context, if I do a console.log this now, this will point towards what? The global object. Like it will point to the global object. And I mean, in Node.js, it won't work, but when we're within our browser, it will work. But within our browser, it should point towards something that looks like this, which is also representing your global object within. So in browser, it is Windows, right? And then whenever we are within the normal Node.js environment, I think you should be able to get the global a global object as well, which is global this. So the dot call, right? That's a very, very so the whole what's it called now, the whole caching thing that I did earlier with the old caching thing that I did with decorators, we can as well implement that same thing with a dot call, right? And I'm just quickly going to run that quickly, right? Let's see. We have a what? Let's create a worker, right? A worker object. And we can say the worker is pointing towards an object. And inside of this object, we can have a method, right? Let's say a method called slow. Let's use this slow this way. Now, within this slow, right, you see that the slow has what? The mean, max, right? And we can maybe call our mean and max and return them as well. I mean, it's still the same thing though, but maybe we should just call it with another way. Let's say let's do this here, and we can say what can I do here? Some heavy duty, some heavy duty, and we can do the heavy duty here. And this heavy duty it could just return, let's say it's returning 100, and we can multiply the 100. We can now multiply our what? Our mean plus max multiply by what? Mean plus max multiply by what? This dot some heavy duty. So this is an heavy operation that we are doing here. And so we can then use our what? Our caching function, right? That create another cache function that can work within what? Within this context, right? So we can say that function caching with call, right? And we can say this is supposed to be what? A function that has fn, right? It can have an fn, and it returns the set of things here. And you know that within this operation now, there are there are different things. The first thing is that we can create our cache with our what? Map c equals to what? Map, right? New map. It's a new constructor map, right? And we can say that if our what? Our c dot has that particular what? Thing, right? If it has that particular what? Particular value that we are dealing with now. So what is this value that we are dealing with here? Maybe we should first do it this way. Let's do it this way to return a function where we can gather as many parameters as possible, rest, that is being passed to us, and we can console.log what? Rest. So let's check and see whether this function is running first. So if we want to check if this function is running, we can say a cached worker, right? This is a worker.slow, right, that we are passing to here. And We can then call cast worker with this, and this should console.log the array of 1 and 2. We should see the array of 1 and 2 in between this place. We should definitely see the array of what? 1 and 2. And so you would see the rest here as what? The array of what? Of 1 and 2, right? In that situation. So now what is the thing that we're trying to also solve for here? The major thing that we do intend to solve for is that instead of us maybe getting the value fresh every time, we want to rely on our what? On our cache. And in this situation, our cache is going to be what? A map that we're trying to what? That we're trying to talk to, right? And so we can say if our what? If our c dot has, right, and if it has what? The array of this thing, you can say it was found here, and we can use the what? Use the one inside of our what? Our map. And else we want to do yeah, this is the big deal now, that instead of us probably just calling the function, we want to change the context of execution of that function. That is, you want to say what? Call this function with a dot call and pass it a what? A new context, pass it a fresh context, and that context is now going to be based on whatever situation that is happening within the things that we're trying to do, whatever situation that is happening between the things that we're trying to do here. And that is what the context represents here. So that way we can now rely on what? We can now set our cache, right? And you can do a cache.set the what? Set the result and the rest. And we can then return what? It has been added to cache, and then we can return result. So if we try to call this now, this is the cast version. And if you try to call it the second time again, right, it will not use the cache, it will not use the fresh operation. It will always use and listen, I think I like this too. We're running into a problem, right? If you notice, we ran into this error that is saying that, oh, this dot what? This dot heavy duty is not what? It's not a function. So it means that in the context that we're trying to run, it cannot find inside of our Ds, it cannot find this what? This heavy duty, because our Ds is now here. This here is an entirely different context entirely. And those are the things that we're trying to solve for, right? Anytime we're using what? Anytime we're using a dot call. So if we want this to work, it's either we call it in a different way by creating a new worker that has a object. And so inside of that object, we must specify the heavy duty operation. So we can say that let what? Worker 2, right? Worker 2 equals to what? An object. And inside of this place now, there must be a value for what? Heavy duty. So our heavy duty must have a value. And so once our heavy duty has a value, then we can just go ahead and just call our what? Our caching function easily. So again, the context of our Ds is very, very important anytime you're using the dot call. So this particular Ds now, the context is very, very important. And that is just a similar operation to what? To using our what? Dot call, just to mimic the caching behavior, right? Just to mimic the caching behavior. Another thing that we could do is we could use dot apply. Like I said earlier, right? There is apply. Instead of us doing dot call, you can do a dot apply, right? And apply, the only difference between the call and the apply is that the parameters, it takes the first parameter for call is the this, and then it takes a comma separated argument. It takes a comma separated argument, but for our apply, it takes array list of argument, right? So it's, this is the this here, and then this one here must be what? An array of things. It must be an array of things, and that is what? And that is the way to go, right? That is the way to go with our what? Our caching. Mm. So that is that with what the call and apply. Both of them are quite similar, that we just use them to give a function context. That's the advanced thing that they do. They help us to give a function a context such that the function can now have its own what can now have its own context, its own dot this value, right? Yeah, they are quite technical, and I think they're not so common again in this generation of engineers that write code as well. And they also have another similar one, which is bind. They have the bind, and I can't remember what the syntax of bind is off the top of my head, but I know that the binding also works, right? The binding also works in that similar manner. So if we call the dot bind, right? If you call the dot bind, the bind accepts what? The this function, and it accepts a this, which is the function that we're trying to call. It accepts some arguments, right? It accepts some arguments, and I think that this should work. Let's see what bound is. We can now call bound with uh you can call bound with some, because the context of our this is this worker here. So inside of this place, right, we can what? We can see our what? We can see our what's it called now? We can see our this dot heavy duty right here. And again, here, where's that other one? This dot call. Yeah, you can change this as well. You can change this as well to a worker, right? Or you can change it to an object that you declare yourself just to fit into what. And you can say some duty. You can say some duty, some heavy duty. Some heavy duty is what? Is a particular function that does something like this. So instead of it returning 1000 like before, we can say it's returning now. So again, they just allow us to customize and give us different context. So the bound or the binding is the same thing. You bind a function to a particular context. You bind a function to a context. You bind a function to a context. And after you've bounded the function to a context, you specify the argument. You bind the function to a context and you specify some sets of what? Argument. And that is the major thing about them. That is the major thing about them. We bind the function to a context and then we are able to use them. You bind the function to a context and then we are able to use them. And again, we can also change. I think we can also that's interesting. We can change so many things about these functions as well. We can change so many things about this function. We can specify. You could just tweak this in any way, but just try to understand the major thing. Anytime you see a dot call, anytime you see a dot apply, and anytime you see a dot bind, right? They helps us to what? To bind, or to help us to call or to apply a particular function into a particular execution, or a context into a particular context or an environment. So that is what they help us to help us to do. And I think that that is that is everything I wanted to talk about today, right? Just with what scheduling APIs, decorating functions, doing the forwarding, right? That is, you're forwarding some particular variables to another function using our call, right? And what apply and function binding, right? That is what I wanted to talk about today. So it's a very high level stuff, but it is something that once you get a hang of it, you will not struggle, right, with it anymore, right? You will not struggle with it anymore. Hmm. Hmm. And also, decorators also work with proxies and reflect and proxies. I'm not sure whether I've talked about reflect and proxies, but maybe when I get there, I'll probably talk about the reflect and proxies, right? We can also use our decorator by combining them with a what? A reflex and this here. Yeah, I could take your question now, Nifemi, right? I can take some of your question now, and I can take some of your question now. I can take some of your question now. Mm. No, we do not know JavaScript as we think we do, but the more you practice, the more you improve generally, right? And the more you also write advanced level of code, the better your understanding. Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead. I still have a couple of. Yeah, sure, sure. Go ahead. Oystein. Okay. Hmm. I think they are probably just the same thing. Oystein as a concept is a way to just shift for like when you can use a function or a particular, like you can use a function when you have not call, like when you have not declared it, right? You can call that function when you have not declared it. So it means that by the time JavaScript is trying to run the code, it will shift all the functions and all the variables declared right at the top of the programming of the program that you're writing, such that anybody that needs them will be able to call them. And that is what Oystein is. It's just the lifting up of your variables to be at the top, right? That is what Oystein is all about. Mm. Right. So yes, you'll be able to, like, when it hoists them, it moves them to the top of your code, such that subsequent places where you need them or you're calling them will be able to have access to them, right? That is what happens. So before JavaScript start running your code, it's hoist everything necessary that it should hoist. That is, it moves them to the top such that you can now have the function called, right? Anytime you need to call those functions. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Do you understand? Nifem. Yeah, yeah, sure. Why not? Go ahead. Go ahead. Is there a difference between a function declaration and a function expression? Pretty much the there's no difference. It's just like anytime you create a function, right? That's the declaration, and then you turn that declaration into an expression. So we can say a function had, right? This is a function. And if we turn this into a variable, right, we can say what, let add expression, right? Add expression equals to what? Can you see my screen? I believe add expression is the same function. And you could just even do, like, you could just point it to what the add function that you had earlier. Just point to the hard function that you had earlier. I mean, it's still the same function. And then anytime we want to call out expression now, then we can call out expression, right? So it's just that, I mean, function declaration seems beautiful, useful, common around, right? So but then there is no difference. It's still a function is a function. You're just assigning a function into a variable. That's when it becomes an expression. Assigning a function to a variable and it becomes an expression, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, it's just the assigning of a variable to any declared function or even an arrow function can even make that in expression. So again, don't be disturbed too much by the whole. They are just words, just representing functions, as the case may be. So all right. Do you have any more questions for me? Hmm, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could still take maybe some or one more, then we'll keep the rest. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Feel free. Feel free. Can you elaborate on an immediately invoked function expression? Right? Hi, F, he. That is, it's a function, but it is instantly called. It's a function, but it is instantly called. It's a function. You can see it that it is a function. But the only thing is that it is instantly called. It is a function, but it is instantly called. It's a function, but it's instantly called. Right? And that is the bulk of what happens there. It is a function, but it is what instantly called, and it has the arrow function variant of it. We have the arrow function. I mean, it is as simple as that. That you can have it with that here, right? I mean, and it becomes an immediately invoked function expression, right? Instantly, it is just called. It's what it is, an immediately invoked function expression. So it is as very beautiful as that. Very beautiful. That's all. That's all. So it's just there are situations where we would come to need these kind of things, right? Most importantly, async, async and await functions, right? We can have async and await functions. Let's say you have an async function, right? You have an async function, and it is doing some interesting stuff, right? So and you are doing some await here, right? Let's assume that we are doing some await here. So if we're doing some await here, we can say maybe res equals to, right, the other thing that we had earlier, right? We had a delay function that we had earlier, right, that we're using. Now if you want to call this function, you cannot call this function by saying async like this. You would have to put a dot then and start doing all of these things there. But you can pipe everything instantly into an immediately invoked what? Function operation, right? That is, you bind everything with a parenthesis. That is the first thing. You put everything inside a bracket and instantly you call it, right? You got everything into a bracket and instantly you call it. And also, if it is requiring some parameters, you can pass the parameters here as well. It allows us to pass parameters as well. So that is what you call what? Immediately invoked function expression. Does that make sense? right. So basically, that is all for today's stream. Right, I have to quickly run, and I'll see you all. Thanks for joining the stream, Oluwanifemi. Um, so I will see you tomorrow, where I'm going to be talking about Next.js and other interesting, beautiful stuff in, React, Next.js environment. So catch you tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.